Imagine being young, full of life, and the daughter of one of the great patriarchs of the Bible. Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah, had dreams and hopes, but her story was marked by a devastating tragedy. It all began when she decided to meet the women of the land where her family lived. What seemed like an ordinary day turned into a nightmare. A Canaanite prince assaulted her, and what happened afterward shook her entire family. Two of her brothers, driven by anger and a desire for revenge, made an extreme decision that left deep scars. But did this revenge bring justice or just more pain to Jacob's family? In this video, you will learn about the painful story of Dinah in the Bible and the revenge carried out by her brothers. So stay until the end of this video to know this impactful story. Dinah's story begins when her family, led by Jacob, settles near Shechem, a city inhabited by Canaanites. Jacob, with his many wives and children, lived in constant movement, and during this period they were camped near this foreign city. The Bible describes in chapter 34 of Genesis that Dinah at one point went out to visit the women of the region. From the context of the narrative, it seems that Dinah was alone, or at least unaccompanied by her brothers or other family members. This detail may be crucial, as in that time, women rarely went out alone, especially in foreign lands where male protection was considered essential. The fact that Dinah was wandering alone in Shechem may also suggest a certain curiosity or perhaps a desire to interact with the local women, since her family was nomadic and temporarily among a people who followed different customs and traditions. The Bible does not provide many details about Dinah's intentions, but we can imagine that, as a young person, she may have wanted to learn more about the culture of the people around her, or perhaps she was simply seeking companionship in a land that seemed strange and unfamiliar to her. This simple act of going out to visit the women of the city, however, ended up being the starting point for a tragic and violent story. Then, a prince of that land, named Shechem, the son of Hamor, a Hivite leader, saw Dinah. Shechem was a figure of great influence and power in that region, being the son of the local leader. He possessed all the privileges and authority that his position as prince granted him, which gave him a sense of impunity, especially when it came to the foreigners who temporarily lived in his lands. Upon seeing Dinah, Shechem was immediately attracted to her beauty and, driven by desire and the abuse of his power, made a decision that would forever mark her story and the story of Jacob's family. In a cowardly and dishonorable act, Shechem forced Dinah to have relations with him. The Bible uses direct and incisive terms to describe the act, revealing the brutality and injustice of his action. He did not court her or try to gain her trust. Instead, Shechem used his position and strength to violate her, completely disregarding Dinah's rights and dignity. The biblical narrative in Genesis is clear and emphatic when recounting the crime. In chapter 34, verses 1 and 2, it is recorded, "Now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the land, saw her, and he took her and lay with her, and so humiliated her." These biblical words are laden with meaning and pain. The act of taking Dinah implies violence and force, showing that Shechem did not respect her will. Furthermore, the term "lay with" carries a connotation of domination and subjugation, illustrating how he took advantage of Dinah's vulnerability. In the end, the text emphasizes that Shechem humiliated her, revealing that beyond the physical violence, there was a moral and social dishonor inflicted upon her, which in the culture and society of that time carried immense weight for a young woman. This type of violence did not affect only Dinah, it was an affront to the entire family of Jacob, staining the honor and reputation of the young woman in an almost irreparable manner. The situation becomes even more serious when we consider the social and cultural context of the biblical period. For a woman of that time, suffering such an assault meant a permanent stain. The family's honor was deeply tied to the purity and behavior of the women, and any violation, even if committed against their will, could be seen as a family disgrace. Dinah, who went out to meet the women of Shechem innocently, saw her life transformed by a brutal act committed by someone who used his position and power to satisfy his own selfish desires. This tragic moment in Dinah's life marked the beginning of a much larger conflict, as Shechem's action would provoke an intense reaction from her brothers and Jacob's family, triggering a series of events that would bring devastating consequences for all involved. However, after having forced relations with Dinah, Shechem seems to have fallen in love with her. Consequently, the young man turned to his father to speak with Jacob, Dinah's father, with the intention of marrying her. Thus, the biblical text, in verses 3 and 4 of chapter 34 of Genesis, explains that Shechem became attached to Dinah, Jacob's daughter. He fell in love with her and began to speak to her affectionately. Then, Shechem asked his father, Hamor, to speak with Jacob so that he could marry Dinah. When Jacob learned that his daughter had been violated, he remained silent and waited for his sons, who were working in the field, to return. This indicates that Jacob probably did not have all the details of what had happened and preferred to wait for his sons to discuss the situation and decide what to do. When Jacob's sons discovered what had happened to Dinah, they were furious about what Shechem had done. They felt that Shechem had committed a great wrong in Israel by disrespecting Jacob's daughter, something that ought not to be done. Verse 7 of chapter 34 of Genesis makes it clear that what Shechem did was a serious crime. Even so, Shechem's father explained that his son was very much in love with Dinah and suggested that they marry. He offered a dowry, as was customary at the time, which the groom was to pay to the bride's father. Additionally, he proposed that the two families unite through marriages, which would allow Jacob's family to settle permanently in that land, engage in business, and acquire property. However, this proposal would also greatly benefit the Shechemites, who would have the children of Israel as close allies. In other words, the Shechemites saw an opportunity to make an agreement that would bring advantages for themselves. If they united with the children of Israel, this could bring prosperity and wealth to the people of Shechem. On the other hand, this represented a great risk for the people of Israel, descendants of Abraham, who were part of the covenant with God. The union with the Shechemites could cause them to mingle with the Canaanites and become one people, which could weaken the identity and values of the covenant community. The Bible reports that Jacob's sons listened to Hamor's proposal, Shechem's father, and pretended to be interested. However, cunningly, they set a condition for the agreement to be accepted. All the men of Shechem would need to be circumcised. Only then would there be economic and social union between the two peoples. Hamor and Shechem quickly agreed to this requirement and, without wasting time, gathered the men of the city to explain the condition that Jacob's sons had imposed. They also explained the economic and social benefits that this union would bring to everyone. Given this, the men of Shechem accepted the proposal and all were circumcised. But on the third day, when the men of Shechem were weaker because of the pain from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, attacked the city. They took advantage of the Shechemites' weakness and killed all the men with the sword, including Prince Shechem and his father, Hamor. After that, Jacob's sons rescued Dinah from Shechem's house and departed. Many scholars believe that at this moment, Dinah was already living as Shechem's wife since she was taken out of his house. In addition to rescuing Dinah, Jacob's sons also plundered the city, taking all the possessions of the Shechemites. They also took the women and children as prisoners. When Jacob learned what his sons, Simeon and Levi, had done, he was deeply distressed and alarmed. The impulsive and violent actions of the two brothers, although motivated by the desire to avenge their sister Dinah's honor, brought much more serious consequences than they could have imagined. Jacob immediately understood that the massacre of the men of Shechem was not just an act of revenge, it was an action that put his entire family at risk. At that time, cities and tribes were interconnected through alliances and family ties, and violence against one group could easily provoke the wrath of other allies. The Canaanites, neighboring peoples who inhabited the same region, might feel threatened or offended by the attack and respond with full force to protect their honor and interests. Jacob knew that if the Canaanites decided to unite against him and his family, they would be numerically and militarily superior, which would mean a dangerous and possibly deadly confrontation for the Israelites. Moreover, Jacob realized that the violence committed by his sons was not just personal revenge. It compromised any possibility of peaceful coexistence with the surrounding peoples. Previously, there was a chance to settle in the land harmoniously, negotiating, forming alliances, and even prospering among the Canaanites. Now any hope of building a peaceful relationship with these peoples was destroyed. The trust that could have been formed was replaced by a potential hatred that put everyone in constant danger. Jacob knew that not only his sons, but also wives, children, and all the members of his clan were vulnerable to attacks and retaliation. In his mind, that reckless act put the future of his entire lineage at risk, the promise of God to Abraham and the continuity of the chosen line. Seeing the result of such violence, he was not only concerned about the present, but also about the impact this event could have in the years to come as they needed to move and settle in other lands that would inevitably be occupied by other hostile peoples. Therefore, upon hearing about the massacre, Jacob reacted with silence and unease, pondering how he could protect his family and deal with the consequences of Simeon and Levi's impulsive act. He knew that, from that moment on, every decision would be crucial to ensure the survival and safety of his people, who were now in an extremely vulnerable situation. However, Jacob's sons, especially Simeon and Levi, remained steadfast in their position and showed no sign of remorse for the massacre they had committed in Shechem. For them, the violent act was not just revenge, it was a matter of honor and justice for their sister. They believed that, by assaulting Dinah, Shechem had dishonored not only her, but the entire family of Jacob. In their view, allowing Shechem to go unpunished would mean accepting that Dinah was treated like a prostitute, which was unacceptable. For Simeon and Levi, the honor of their sister and the family needed to be restored at any cost, even if it meant shedding blood. This desire for justice, however, strongly contrasted with Jacob's perspective. Although he recognized the seriousness of what Shechem had done, he viewed the massacre of an entire city as a completely disproportionate response. To Jacob, his son's actions were not merely a reaction to the crime committed against Dinah, but an explosion of violence that stained the family's reputation and compromised the safety of everyone. He understood that by responding so brutally, Simeon and Levi had disregarded the broader consequences such an act would bring to the people of Israel. The disproportion of the revenge weighed heavily on Jacob, as he knew that even in a context of retaliation, his son's actions needed to be just and measured. The massacre did not only eliminate Shechem and his father, Hamor, but also decimated an entire city, involving innocent people who had no part in the crime against Dinah. For Jacob, this turned the act of revenge into a crime in itself. He felt outraged and powerless, realizing that despite his leadership, his sons acted independently, following their own impulses and putting the entire family in danger. Even many years later, Jacob did not forget the actions of Simeon and Levi. Before his death, as he blessed each of his sons, he made sure to condemn their violent actions. In his final blessing recorded in Genesis, Jacob not only lamented what had happened, but also pronounced a curse upon Simeon and Levi, predicting that their tribes would be scattered and divided in Israel. For Jacob, it was impossible to fully bless those who had brought so much disorder and violence to the family. This final condemnation shows how much Jacob considered the massacre unjustifiable, even after all the years that had passed. The actions of Simeon and Levi were not seen as acts of courage or defense, but as examples of impulsiveness and lack of wisdom, something that, according to Jacob, needed to be remembered and corrected so that future generations would know that such behavior was not acceptable among the descendants of Israel. After this tragic and violent episode, the fate of Dinah remains shrouded in mystery. The Bible does not offer further details about what happened to her after she was rescued by her brothers Simeon and Levi. We do not know if Dinah married, had children, or even how she dealt with the consequences of that trauma throughout her life. The silence of the scriptures concerning her may indicate that the experience was so painful that her story became a closed chapter in the family narrative, an event so tragic that for the people of Israel, the focus shifted to the larger developments, leaving Dinah's figure on the sidelines. Nevertheless, this story has a profound significance as it demonstrates how the divine protection over Jacob's family was put to the test. The promise that God had made to Abraham, and which extended to Jacob, was that his descendants would become a great nation and inherit the land of Canaan. However, this incident in Shechem brought an immense challenge to that promise, as the rash actions of Simeon and Levi put the survival of the entire family at risk. Jacob knew that if the Canaanites decided to unite in retaliation for the massacre, his family could be wiped out, threatening the fulfillment of the divine covenant. On the other hand, this event also foreshadowed the ongoing conflicts between the Israelites and the Canaanites that would follow in the biblical narrative. The relationship between Jacob's descendants and the peoples of the land of Canaan would continue to be marked by tensions, battles, and disputes over territory. Thus, although the Bible does not provide further details about Dinah's life after this tragedy, the episode serves as a warning and a reminder of the struggles the Israelites would face in the future. It is a story that marks a crucial point in the journey of Jacob and his descendants, highlighting the fragility of peace and the complexity of relations between the peoples of that time. Now write in the comments if you already knew Dinah's story in the Bible, share this video with more people, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. May God bless your life.